Amud Aleph.
Kuf Bet Amud Aleph, 16 lines from the top in Masechet Pesachim. Well, we're gonna go through to the middle of Kuf Gimel. You'll see, it works out. Everything works out in the big picture. So, yesterday the issue was the following: we have a three-way machloket Amoraim about somebody who hears Kiddush in the Beit Knesset. So, according to Rav, one who hears the Kiddush, now we're talking about those who make Kiddush on Friday night in the Beit Knesset, which is not our custom here, but many synagogues do that. So according to Rav, one who hears Kiddush in the Beit Knesset on Friday night fulfills the mitzvah of Kiddush, but when he goes home, if he wants to drink wine, he has to say Borei Priya Gefen. Because the Birkat Gefen doesn't count. But he doesn't have to say Kiddush again. According to Shmuel, the whole thing doesn't count. He has to say Kiddush all over again, which is what we maintain la halacha. And then you have Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that not only do you fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush from hearing the Kiddush in the Beit Knesset, you don't even have to say Borei Priya Gefen when you get home. You get home, pull out the Manischevet and keep drinking. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Now, this was disputed on the previous Amud. They kind of refuted it. They showed that a Braita contradicts this. But then they brought another Braita and they started dealing with the general issue of what we call Akira. A person who is eating or drinking and they leave the room and they come back. Do they have to say a new bracha? This is a more general issue, not particular to Kiddush, but brachot, in all cases. A person's eating an apple, they leave the room or they leave the building, they come back, they want to continue eating the apple, they have to say Borei Priya Etz again. What if they were eating bread? If they were eating bread, which requires a bracha achrona bimkoma, okay, in other words, you have to go back to your place to say Birkat Hamazon. Therefore, even if you left, you're expected back, so it doesn't break the seudah. An apple, you eat an apple, a few bites of an apple, and you leave. That's it. You were done. Okay, when you come back, you're starting over. Hamotzi, you knew you had to come back for Birkat Hamazon, so even though you left and then you came back, it doesn't break the meal. Okay, that's the halacha. That was Rav Chizda. However, there's another view that says there are two conditions. Number one, that you're coming back, and number two, that you left somebody at the table. In other words, you had a group meal, and 9 of the 10 of you went outside for some important thing, and you left one guy at the table. When you come back, you can resume your eating as if you never left, because you left somebody at the table. But if there was nobody left at the table, says Rabbi Yehuda, then it's a totally new meal. Okay, so this is the machloket. Is it enough, even if everybody left the table, as long as they have to come back for Birkat Hamazon, the meal's not over? Or does it have to be that you left somebody at the table, watching the fort, so to speak, when you left, that when you come back, you're resuming the meal? That was the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. And Rav Chizda is maintaining, according to the Chachamim, that all you need is an obligation to go back. It doesn't matter if you actually left anybody at the table. So now the Gemara says, Lema tehvet yuftad Rabbi Yochanan. This seems to be a refutation of Rabbi Yochanan. Why is it a refutation of Rabbi Yochanan? Obviously, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, you could leave, but you could be eating an apple and go to another place and continue eating the apple and not have to say a bracha, because he says you can come in, hear Kiddush on Friday night and go home and keep drinking your Manischewitz at home. He doesn't hold that you need to have an obligation to say a bracha achrona in order to justify that you're continuing, in other words, the drinking that you were doing before. It's not true. Even if you only had a taste of the wine, let's say a tiny taste, and then you went home, that would be enough. The fact that you started, you can continue. So the fact that here the Braita is saying that you need to have an obligation to go back, but that if you had been eating an apple and you left the room, it seems like if you were eating an apple and you left the building and you came back, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you could continue eating the apple, no problem. According to Rabbi Yochanan. So this is a refutation of Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, wait a second, but v'lav mi'oti v'nei chadazimna. Didn't we already refute Rabbi Yochanan? We already refuted him before. How many times do you have to refute the poor guy? Right? We already refuted it. The Gemara says, no, because for the sake of intellectual honesty, if there's more than one disproof, we want to bring all the disproofs. There's more than one source to refute Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara says, no, Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan can get around this one. Why? That Rabbi Yochanan will tell you that even if they weren't eating bread, even if they were eating lettuce and salad because they're now vegan, non-gluten, very healthy eaters, and they were eating salad, and they left, and they came back, they could also continue without saying another bracha. It doesn't have to be hamotzi. It doesn't have to be that they were coming back to say Birkat Hamazon. Any case would be good. However, he says, that the reason why the Gemara, the Braita brought the case of eating hamotzi was to show you how strict Rabbi Yehuda is. That even though they were eating a meal with bread, unless they left somebody at the table when they walked out, they're going to have to say another bracha when they come back. That's how strict Rabbi Yehuda is.
According to Rabbi Yehuda, in that situation, they also have to bench before
they would, in theory, they should have. They should have, right. So when they come back, they have to say Birkat Hamazon and start over. Right. That's what he would say. That's what he would say. Yeah. That's what he would say. So what is Rabbi Yochanan telling you? He was saying it's not because of a difference between bread and salad. No, really, even according to the Chachamim, even if you were eating salad and you left and you came and everybody left and everybody came back, they don't have to say Borei Priya Adama again. Not necessary. However, to show you how strict Rabbi Yehuda is, even if they were eating bread, they have to leave somebody at the table to show that they're continuing their seudah. But Rabbi Yochanan would say, but I would apply the rule according to the Chachamim, even to lettuce, even to anything. Okay, there's no such thing unless you're officially done. If you're planning on coming back, that's enough. It doesn't have to be that there's a bracha that remains to be said. Okay, because incidentally, because Borei Nefashot is not counted. He means it has to be a bracha of substance, like Birkat Hamazon.
No, but if you but if you did that and you came back, like you left and came back, you still have
for salad.
Let's say you forgot to say bracha harona and you
for Borei Nefashot.
For Borei Nefashot.
Yeah, you could say Borei Nefashot.
Even if you left, you forgot.
You could say Borei Nefashot anywhere. You don't have to say it in the place.
Anywhere.
You can do it anywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's why they don't consider Borei Nefashot such a serious bracha. When they say a bracha afterwards, they mean Birkat Hamazon or Ala Mechia.
That's the only one that
that requires that you come back. Exactly.
It requires the place too?
Should. Yeah. L'chatchila, yeah. Okay, so that's how Rabbi Yochanan will get out of it. However, the previous refutation of Rabbi Yochanan from the previous Braita on the last Amud hasn't been retracted, which clearly said Shinui Makom Tzarich Levarech, that if you change your place, you have to make a new bracha. That wasn't retracted. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't have a way around that. But the point is, he could have explained this away. In the end, we don't hold like Rabbi Yochanan. So the Tanya Kivatid Rav Chizda, there's a Braita that supports Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda is the one who says that if you have to return to say a bracha achrona, your meal is not over. And you can come back and resume without saying any brachot. That if a group is drinking wine together, that if they got up and they came back, they don't have to make a new bracha. Because wine, again, you also say bracha me'in shalosh. You say ala gefen val priya gefen. That's a significant bracha. And therefore, even though you didn't leave anybody at the table, everybody went out, let's say, to minyan. They went to a minyan. And they came back to continue drinking. Since they never had in mind to finish drinking, they're allowed to come back and continue without making barachot. They don't have to say ala gefen first, and then go, and then come back and say borei priya gefen again. They could say, we didn't say ala gefen yet, so we're going to go, say our mincha, and come back and continue. If there was a group of people who were eating on Friday afternoon and all of a sudden Shabbat started, the sun set, so what should they do? We learned about this in the very, very beginning of this parak. So you have different views. One view is pores mapau mikadesh, which is actually the view of the halacha, that you can interrupt in the middle of your seudah, put pores mapa, put a covering over the food that's on the table, say kiddush, and then continue where you left off. That's the opinion that holds the day. Another view says you have to stop, say Birkat Hamazon on your weekday food, and start with Kiddush all over again. Another one says you can keep going until you're done. You don't have to stop. And then whenever you're done, then you say Kiddush later. Okay, those are the three views that we've seen already. So what do the rabbis say here? So Shabbat starts. So what should you do? Mivi'in lo kos shel yain. They bring you a cup of wine. Ve'omer alav kiddushat hayom. You should say kiddushat hayom, which means kiddush, because Friday you were sitting and eating and sunset. You didn't realize. So say kiddush. V'sheni omer alav birkat hamazon. Bring another cup and say birkat hamazon. What does that mean? That's holding the opinion of Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, the view of Rabbi Yehuda, which is that you can pores mapam mekadesh. In other words, you can interrupt your meal, say kiddush, and then resume your meal where you left off, and say birkat hamazon when you're done. You don't have to say birkat hamazon on the weekday eating. Okay, you said hamotzi already. You were eating, you interrupt in the middle, say kiddush, continue. When you're done eating, say birkat hamazon of Shabbat. That's what Rabbi Yehuda would say. That's Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, no problem, says Rabbi Yossi. Keep eating. You don't need to say kiddush. Why are you in such a rush? You started eating on Friday. This is a Friday meal. This is not the Shabbat meal. Keep eating. There's no rule that you have to interrupt. We turn to Amud Bet. Gamru. Once they finished eating, kos rishon mevarech alav birkat hamazon. The first kos, the first cup, they should say birkat hamazon, because that's shel Yom Shishi. That's the Friday bracha. V'asheni omer alav kiddushat hayom. And a second cup, kiddush. In other words, according to Rabbi Yossi, no need to interrupt and say kiddush. Finish up your meal like a ben adam. Don't worry. Finish. Don't rush. Say birkat hamazon nicely over a cup of wine, and then, because that was the custom back then, we don't have that as prevalent today. And then, when you're done with the birkat hamazon, now you say kiddush.
It's the weekday birkat hamazon.
Right, weekday birkat hamazon. Yep, it wasn't Shabbat. It's not a Shabbat meal. It's not a Shabbat meal. Yeah. You didn't change it into a Shabbat meal. Right? Yeah. Amai. So now the Gemara asks a different question. V'nimrinu letarvayu achad dakasa. Why do you need two cups? Is really the question. Why do you tell me, bring cup number 1, I'll say birkat hamazon. Bring cup number 2, I'll say kiddush. Or vice versa. Bring cup 1, I'll say kiddush. Bring cup number 2, I'll say birkat hamazon. Why are you wasting? Use one cup. In other words, say birkat hamazon, then say at the end of birkat hamazon you say kos borei pri gefen, and then continue Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho, etc. Finish on one cup. You can hit two birds with one stone, right? You want to save money. It's economical. Good policy. So Amar Rav Huna says, Rav Sheshet said, "En omrim shete kiddushot al kos echad." We don't say two mitzvot, two kiddushot, so to speak, two holy things on one kos. My ta'ama, what's the reason? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Here's a very famous saying: "Lefi she'en osin mitzvot chavilot." We don't package mitzvot. We don't do mitzvot in packages. Rashi says on the side. What does it mean? That we don't do chavilot. I'm sorry, it's not Rashi that says it. It's actually Rashbam that says it. Because remember, Rashbam here fills in. There's a truncated Rashi. The story that they say, I haven't verified it historically, but the story is that Rashi's commentary at some point was destroyed, and he tried to rewrite it, and he didn't complete in its entirety the commentary on this section of Pesachim. So the Rashbam, his student, wrote a longer commentary. The Rashbam's commentary is somewhere between Rashi and Tosafot. It's not quite as long and involved as Tosafot. It's not as brief and to the point as Rashi. It's somewhere in between. It fills in a lot of details, and it's considered one of the fundamental commentaries on the 10th parak of Masechet Pesachim. So when it comes to the halachot of the Seder, which this parak is going to deal with at length, that's why you find the Rashbam is quoted a lot in halachic discussions of the Seder, because he is one of the key commentaries on the daf for all of these discussions. So what is the reason why we don't say chavilot? So Rashbam says the mehazeh alei kamasui, because it looks like the mitzvot are a burden to you. You're trying to consolidate them on one cup. I don't want to use more than one cup. I'll do my kiddush and my havdalah and my birkat hamazon all on one cup. So that's called doing it chavilot, because you don't want, it's like you want to limit your expenditure. You're being cheap about the mitzvot. The mitzvot are not worth it to you. It's a burden to you. So now, vilo, is it really true that we never consolidate more than one mitzvah and one cup of wine? Is that really true? It isn't true. Ve'atani, we learned in a Braita, nechnas lebeito b'motzei Shabbat, somebody who enters his house on Saturday night, mivarech ala yayin, ve'ala ma'or, ve'ala bisamim. This is according to Beit Shammai, not according to the way we do it, which is according to Beit Hillel. The person who comes in on Motzei Shabbat says, birkat hayayin, borei prei gefen, ala ma'or, borei me'orei ha'esh, ve'ala bisamim, the blessing on bisamim, ve'achar kach omer havdalah lakos, and then he says havdalah. Now that's according to Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai have saying, borei me'orei ha'esh before bisamim. We say bisamim first. And then he says, ve'im en lo ela kos ehad. Let's say he had sudash lishit, and he only had 1 cup of wine. He didn't have enough to have a cup of wine for the Birkat Hamazon of Sudash Lishit, as well as a cup of wine for Havdalah. So then he says, what should he do then? He should leave it till after Birkat Hamazon. Okay, and he should have both on 1 cup. In other words, he should say Birkat Hamazon on the cup of wine that he has, and then use the same cup of wine for Havdalah, since he only has 1 cup. But that shows you, what are you doing? You're consolidating. You're doing Birkat Hamazon as well as Havdalah on the same cup. And you just told me that you're not allowed to do that. So the Gemara answers that Ein lo shani, a person who doesn't have another cup is different. In other words, it's not a matter of I decided I'm going to cut corners by doing as many mitzvot as possible on 1 cup of wine to save money. That's not the reason. It's that he didn't have another cup of wine, so he's allowed to do it. But in a case where you did have another cup of wine, you should use another cup of wine. So now the Gemara says, "Vayom Tov shechal achara Shabbat." The itlay. What about when Yom Tov falls after Shabbat? Yom Tov falls on Saturday night. So what do? We consolidate Kiddush and Havdalah, right, into one thing. So, right, but we put it all on 1 cup. It's part of the Kiddush. We integrate everything, right? And what happens? So it says, Amar Rav yaknaha. And according to Rav, the way you do it is yaknaha, which means yayin. You say borei priya gefen. Kiddush. You say kiddush is in that case mekadesh Yisrael v'azimanim. Then you say ner and havdalah because you're ending Shabbat. That's not the way exactly, and we do yaknahaz. We have the also shechayanu at the end, zman, yaknahaz. Okay, but that's, so the point is that you consolidate them. So Amri, they said, midilo amar ziman. Look at the way Rav said it. He said yakneha without the zayin. That means there's no shechayanu. Miklal, which implies that b'shvi'i shel Pesach haskinan. He must have been talking about the 7th day of Pesach falling out on Saturday night. Why? Because there's no shechayanu. There's no zayin. There's no zman. So and since it was the 7th day of Pesach, they called my dahavele achile veletle. Why did Rav tell you to say kiddush and havdalah in 1 cup if the 7th day of Pesach falls on Saturday night? Very simple reason. Because you ran out of all your wine over the holiday. It's the last day of the holiday. You ate and drank everything. So you only had 1 cup. That's why you had to do it. But normally, what would you do? You'd use 2 cups, 1 for Havdalah, 1 for Kiddush.
But what else would you do? How else would you do it?
I don't know, but they're just hold on to your hat. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So veha Yom Tov Rishon de itlei. But what about on the first day of Yom Tov when you have plenty of wine? Because we know that even the poorest person, the Rashbam reminds us, that even the poorest person on the first, and Rashi mentions it as well, has to be given 4 cups. That was the first Mishnah in this perek. Even the poorest person has to have 4 cups of wine given to him by tzedakah in order to do the 4 cups. So we know that the person has enough wine for the seder. And yet even there, what do we say? Vayom Tov Rishon Didlei V'amar Abaye Yak Zinaha V'Rava Amar Yak Nahaz, which is the halacha. In other words, they argued about how to set up the Kiddush and Havdalah. Abaye said, you should say Borei Priya Gefen and Kiddush, then Shechayanu. Because what is the Shechayanu going on? The new day, the Kiddush, the Yom Tov. Then Ner and Havdalah. Then you do the candle and Havdalah to say goodbye to Shabbat. And Rava said, no, you should do Yayin and Kiddush. That's correct. Then Ner and Havdalah. And then only at the end, Shechayanu. That's the way that we do it. So they're talking about the first day of Yom Tov. And yet they're still saying that you put it all on 1 cup of wine. Ela Havdalah v'Kiddush chadam miltahi. Birkat Hamazon v'Kiddush trei mileninu. Rather, what we conclude is that Havdalah and Kiddush are really 2 of the same thing. They're both about differentiating levels of holiness. Kiddush is about going from chol to kodesh, going from a lower level of sanctity to a higher level, or bringing in sanctity, differentiating between the significance of one day and the other. And Havdalah is about differentiating the significance of one day and another. So when we go from Saturday to Sunday, we go from Shabbat into a holiday and Sunday, we're differentiating in two ways. We're differentiating between Shabbat and Yom Tov. We're also differentiating between Yom Tov and other days by saying Kiddush. They're both about differentiation, and therefore they can be consolidated over one cup. However, putting Birkat HaMazon and Kiddush over one cup is not called for. Putting Havdalah and Birkat HaMazon on one cup, it's not necessary unless you only have one cup. If you have more than one cup, there's no justification for it. Now we get into, and we're going to go a little further since we started halfway down the previous Amud, we can go a little bit further into the next Amud and see what's going to happen here. There is a divergence of opinion on how to deal with this situation of a Saturday night holiday where we need to have both Kiddush and Havdalah recited over the same cup. And basically, I'm going to summarize for you what the issues at hand are going to be, and we shall see how they play out. Okay? Number one is going to be, what should be first, Kiddush or Havdalah? Should we say goodbye to Shabbat and then say hello to the new holiday, which is starting Saturday night? Or should we first say hello to the new holiday and only then say goodbye to Shabbat? Because we want to hang on to Shabbat as long as possible. We don't want to kick it out right away. That's question number one. Question number two is going to be, what is more important in terms of the wine and its connection to Kiddush or Havdalah? Is it more important that the Kiddush be closer to the blessing on wine be closer to the Kiddush? Or is it more important that the blessing on wine be closer to Havdalah? One could make the argument that it's more important that it be closer to the Kiddush because after all, the Kiddush is what you're starting now. Or one could argue that it's more important that it be close to Havdalah because Kiddush can be said even on bread. But Havdalah can only be said on wine, so maybe we have to make sure that the wine is closest to the Havdalah. And the third question that's going to be asked is there a necessity of separating between the blessings of Kiddush and Havdalah so that they don't run into one another? Okay, so now we're going to see every possible permutation of this. Okay, every possible one that seems that they could think of. So Gufa, Yom Tov Shechaliyot Achara Shabbat, Yom Tov that falls on Saturday night. And here the Rashbam actually brings a lot of Yerushalmi that discusses this in more detail and explains some of the reasons. But we'll see. Rav Amar Yaknaha. Rav says the right way to do it is Yaknaha, which is Yain Kiddush. Say Yain and Kiddush first, and then Ner and Havdalah. And so the Rashbam says, because the reason is because Kiddushat Yom Adifa me Havdalah. Because bringing in a new day of Kiddusha is greater than saying goodbye to a day.
Because you're going up.
Because you're going into a new thing. Right? You're going into a new thing of Kiddusha. You're not saying goodbye. Saying goodbye is a negative. Right? Saying hello is a positive. Alternatively says, if a person says Havdalah first, it's like they want to get rid of the Shabbat. They want to get into Yom Tov, they want to get rid of Shabbat. And we don't want to look like we're getting rid of Shabbat. So he wants to put Kiddush first, either because the Kiddush is the positive, it's welcoming the new Yom Tov. Havdalah is the goodbye, that's a negative. Or because he wants to delay Havdalah to the end, because he doesn't want to make it look like Shabbat is a burden. Either way, he wants the order to be Kiddush before Havdalah. Ushmuel Amar Yanahak. What does that mean? Yayin ner Havdalah, Kiddush. So Shmuel says the opposite. Do a regular Havdalah. Wine, candle, Havdalah, done with Shabbat. Now, Kiddush. Hello, you new day.
That's the halacha though.
No, it isn't.
Isn't that?
No, it's Yayin, Kiddush, ner Havdalah.
That's right.
Yeah. No, we don't call it halachas Rav. Halacha kerav be'isurei. Right? So anyway, Shmuel, and so the Rashbam again, he explains, he brings from a lot of things here from the Yerushalmi, but he basically says that what's the idea? You want to first, the Shabbat is of greater holiness, so we first escort the Shabbat out. He gives the analogy, it's going to be brought on the next Amud, that if a king is coming and then the second in command is going to be arriving, we first escort the king out before the second in command is welcomed in. And so therefore the Shabbat is of a greater Kedusha. So we first say goodbye to Shabbat and then say hello to Yom Tov. That's how Shmuel understands it. So he says, do Yain Ner Havdalah. They both agree that the candle and Havdalah are together, of course. But the question is, Kiddush or Havdalah first? Rav says Kiddush first. Shmuel says Havdalah first. V'Rabbah, we turn to Kuf Gimel, Amud Aleph. Rabbah says Yahanak. What's Yahanak? Yain and Havdalah. Then Ner, then Kiddush. Now that's strange. Why all of a sudden are we now putting the candle in between the wine and the Havdalah? Normally it goes wine, candle, Havdalah. Now there's no Bisamim, of course, because we only smell Bisamim when we're going into weekday. Because we're going from a holy time into weekday. Here we're going into Yom Tov, so we still have some Neshama Yetera left. We don't have to smell the Bisamim. So, right, you're going to another holiness. So the Rashbam says you still have somewhat of the Neshama Yetera. You don't have to smell the Bisamim. So Rashbam says, what is the reasoning behind Yahanak? So Sevira like Kirav, okay, that he holds like Rav, that we want to say that we want to put Ma'or ben Kiddush lahavdalah. Okay, that we want to separate between Havdalah and Kiddush by putting the light in there. He doesn't want to put Havdalah right next to the Kiddush. Okay, Rav also has a separation. He has Yain Kiddush, Ner Havdalah. So there's an interruption. Now, Rabbah wants to say Havdalah before Kiddush, not Kiddush before Havdalah. But he wants there to be a separation. Okay? See that? So in other words,
it would be a denigration.
He agrees with Rav in one thing and he disagrees with him in another thing. He agrees that you need to separate between Kiddush and Havdalah with something. But he says we should do really the Havdalah before the Kiddush. Okay? So he agrees with Shmuel on which should come first. But he agrees with the Rav that you need a separation, you have to put the candle in between. V'Levi Amar Kniya. Levi says, you know what you should do? Kiddush and Ner first. Okay? Strange. So Kiddush first. Meaning, start out by saying, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol am, v'romemanu mikol lashon. Start with the Kiddush. Then Baruch atah Hashem mekadesh Yisrael v'azimanim. Then Borei meorei ha'esh. Then wine, then Havdalah. Now what's the reason? So Rashbam again comes along and he explains it in detail. He says, what's the reason? He holds Kiddush has to come before Havdalah. Okay? So that's just like whom? That's just like Rav before, right? Kiddush has to come before Havdalah. But he wants to make sure that the wine is attached not to the Kiddush but to the Havdalah. Okay? Because wine and Havdalah go together. You can never make Havdalah without wine. You can make Kiddush without wine. You can make Kiddush on bread. So he says the wine and the Havdalah have to go together. So why then does he put the candle before wine? Why doesn't he do this? Kiddush, wine, candle, Havdalah. That would be better.
Because he wants it separated.
So the Rashbam says that really what you should have is, he says, Hilkach Kiddush Bereisha, Vadar Kosid Havdalah. He says, Va'inami rotzin lavdil ben Kiddush lavdalah b'cholei yicholet. He wants to separate between Kiddush and Havdalah as much as possible. So he puts if you were to put Kiddush, Yayin, Ner Havdalah, you're separating between the wine and the Havdalah. You don't want to do that. Because it will look like the Yayin is connected to the Kiddush instead of the Havdalah. And you don't want to put the Havdalah right next to the Kiddush. So therefore he makes as much of a separation as possible. Kiddush, Ner Yayin, Havdalah. Amre Rabbanan, Amre the rabbi said, Kina, Kiddush, Yayin, Ner Havdalah. Now you can see why that would work. Right? Kiddush first. Baruch Mekadesh Yisrael V'azimanim. Then a regular order of Havdalah. Yayin, Ner, Havdalah. Right? Wine, candle, Havdalah. Then, more bread, the Ravna, sorry. The master son of Ravna, Amar, Nikia. He says, Ner first. Why? Because Ner is on enjoying the light. You're already enjoying the light, but you should do it first. And you can actually do Ner, even, let's say a person didn't have a candle for Havdalah. They can say the Birkat HaYayin, Bisamim, and Havdalah. And later on, when they see a candle, they can say the blessing on the Ner. It's separate. So he says, do Ner first, then do Yayin, which one was I on? So do Nikia, right. So do Ner first, then Kiddush, then Yayin, then Havdalah. So that way the wine is adjacent to the Havdalah. Marta Amar Mishmed Rabbi Yehoshua. Marta said the name of Rabbi Yehoshua. Nihak. ner, again agreeing that the candle should come first, but yahak, then you should have, instead of kiyah, you have yahak, which is ner, wine, and then havdalah and kiddush in quick succession. So that way the wine is going on, both of them, but it's adjacent to the havdalah. But that's putting havdalah before kiddush instead of kiddush before havdalah. See? Shalach le'avod Shmuel Rebbe. So the father of Shmuel, so you could see every possibility of the different moving parts is covered here. Okay, each one is weighing a different factor differently. Finally, Shmuel said to Rebbe, Yilamedenu Rabbeinu Seder Havdalot. Please teach us the order of Havdalah. Hey, how should it be? Shalach le, he sent to him, Kach amar Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yosei. This is what Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosei, said. Shamar Mishum Aviv. Shamar Mishum Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananya. That he said in the name of his father, that he said in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananya. Nahik. That you should do ner, havdalah, yayin, and kiddush. Another variation. Okay, so in other words, do candle, hamavdil ben kodesh lekodesh. Then wine and kiddush. So you do havdalah first, with its candle, and then the wine goes on the kiddush.
How do you do that? Don't you need wine for Havdalah?
It's all part of on one cup, so it's there, but it's it's in the wrong order, so to speak. Amar Rabbi Hanina gives an example. Mashal Rabbi Yishua ben Hananya lemelech sheyotze veiparkus nichnas. That he says it's like a king leaving and a second in command coming. Milavin et hamelech. First you say goodbye to the king. That's why you have ner and havdalah first to say goodbye to Shabbat. V'achar kach yotzim lekrat aparkus, and then you welcome the second in command by doing yayin and kiddush. Okay, but what's the bottom line? Ma'y have'ala. What's the bottom line? Abaye amar yak zinnaha. According to Abaye, the order is yayin, kiddush, shehechayanu, candle, and then havdalah. V'Rava amar yak nahaz v'hilcheta kiRava. And the law is like Rava. So let's just understand this last machloket. Okay, the last machloket is, should it be yayin? They both agree that it should be wine first, followed by kiddush. Okay, and then, and only then, do we do candle and havdalah. They both agree that it should be yayin and kiddush, which is exactly like Rav originally said. Wine and kiddush, followed by candle and havdalah. The only question they're arguing is, where do you put the shechayanu? So according to Abaye, you should put the shechayanu right after kiddush. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. Because when you normally make kiddush, it's connected to the kiddush, not the havdalah. Sure. The shechayanu is on the new day. It should be after the kiddush. Right in the middle, according to Abaye. However, Rava says no. Just because really shechayanu, it says zman omro afilo b'shuk. You can say shechayanu anytime. On Yom Kippur, we say shechayanu, there's no cup. We just say it. You say it on any time. If a person forgot to say shechayanu in the kiddush on Yom Tov, they can say it at any time on the day. It doesn't have to be at the... So he says, just like we always put it last, we put it last in this case as well. It doesn't have to be adjacent to the kiddush. So therefore the halacha is yak nahaz, yayin kiddush ner havdalah zman, and not like any of these other permutations. And that's the conclusion of today's sugya.